Hey guys, this is my eSports and education panel. I am Makomi. I have been working in eSports for several years now. I got my start being an Overwatch player for Pride Start Gaming. I captained their team for 2 years. I have a lot of tournament placements. I've been voted to all-star teams, first female in America actually signed to an org to play Overwatch for tournaments, so that was kind of cool. I now do stuff with American Esports as their director of marketing programs. I also manage a team that will be entering the Overwatch League Open Division in this weekend. And fun fact, we actually just placed top 16 in the Broken Barriers tournament, which was our first major. It was a North and South American server, they combined everything. And for being around for 2 weeks, I think that's pretty good, 2 weeks top 16 against former Overwatch League pros. Did pretty good. And I coach collegiately now too sometimes, so.
Yeah, you most recently ran a boot camp at St. Francis University in Lorton, I believe, Pennsylvania?
Yeah, or Edinburgh.
Something like that, yeah.
So it sounded Scottish. It wasn't though, but it sounded like it. But yeah, I do that stuff. So yeah, and this is Ben.
Yeah, so my name is Ben Rubenstein. I started playing semi-competitive esports around the age of 13. I'm 27 now, so I've been doing that for quite a while. When I was about 21, I stopped playing and did more organizational related stuff. I actually didn't go to college despite most of my work being related to consulting for college and their esports. So in terms of education in esports, my path was very untraditional. Right now I serve as, my title changes constantly, but I basically run the institutional division for my company, American Esports. And we've worked with multiple clients, and we're talking to a ton of them. So we're working with Mount Aloysius, St. Francis. We're talking to a bunch of people. So really, there's a lot of things in esports that overlap with colleges, and it's mostly not actually for players. Players are mostly in the minority. So we can get into that a little more later.
That's actually a really good point that players are the minority, because I don't know about you guys, but have you guys been following esports at all? How many of you have been following it for a few years? A few years? How many of you just started following it basically when the Overwatch League got put on ESPN? Because that's when a lot of people just started following it.
Okay, I'm curious, what games do you guys play? Raise your hand if you play Overwatch. Apex Legends? League of Legends? Okay. Dota? Call of Duty? CSGO? Okay.
Smash.
Smash, yeah. All right, so we've got a pretty mostly Overwatch and League of Legends here, but a few in between.
Which is cool.
Yeah, those are actually pretty much the top 2 college esports games.
Every college that I've been talking to, because I have friends that play on TESPA teams as well that I Smurf with and stuff, and a lot of colleges have Overwatch and League of Legends teams, and Rocket League is becoming big now too.
Yeah, I think part of the reason that it's predominantly League of Legends and Overwatch, or they get more traction than anybody else's, and Smash, because, for League of Legends, it's just the largest game there is. It's everywhere, everyone plays it. For Overwatch, they have TESPA, so that's very helpful to have that sort of corporate support structure behind you. And for Smash Brothers, a lot of colleges just feel like that's a safe area because it only requires one player per team for the majority of games, and it's also easier to organize for that reason.
Yeah, and Switches are much more affordable than gaming PCs.
Significantly, yeah.
So we're spending a lot of time talking about collegiate esports because that's what our day jobs mostly entail at the moment. But there are varying different levels of esports in education and whatnot. We were recently at Super Smash Con. What was it, August, beginning of August, right after I started working with American Esports. And there was a guy there you introduced me to.
Nairo?
Not Nairo. He did introduce me to Nairo, though, and I got a really nice interview. You should check it out on Twitter.
He's a very sweet gentleman.
He is very kind and very well-spoken. I didn't have to proofread anything he sent me. It was magical. But that was the owner of the Game Gym.
Oh, Josh Hafkin, yes.
Yeah, and that was the first time I heard of the Game Gym. And they it's like a community center, but instead of it being geared towards like teenagers, like high school students or like young adults, it's geared towards like young children.
Yeah,
like
about ages
elementary age.
8 to
like I think 12 or
14. Yeah. And they don't teach you just how to like be a better player. They teach you how to be a better teammate, how not to be toxic online. They give kids like a social structure environment and educate parents as well. So it's all about being a better player and not outside of the game and inside of the game. And for parents, I think it's important what they do with them, and I think that's something we'll see a lot more when it comes to like youth and esports and parental involvement, because at the end of the day, video games can do a lot for children with spatial recognition, with learning to read if they have learning disabilities, with focusing on different things and a whole host of other things. But parents cannot regulate something they don't understand. So you need to, if you're a parent, you should be playing video games with your kids, essentially, if you want to try to make rules around it.
And I actually am a parent, and my son is almost to the age where he would be able to go to the Game Gym and stuff. And it's just like, it's really interesting to me because like, you guys, most of you are probably in like the millennial age range and everything. And like growing up, there was a huge stigma against playing video games. Like they'll rot your brain. You're not gonna be intelligent if you play them. You're gonna develop like social anxiety and like miss social cues and things like that. But here nowadays, we're using them to teach people, and we're using them to like teach social cues. Like my son, he's an only child, and sometimes like he just doesn't get social cues sometimes, and so like I have him play RPGs with me, and he watches how like I interact dialogue wise with people, and he's like, Mom, how did you get that guy to like do what you wanted? And I'm like, well, I wasn't a dick. That helps. And so like you're able, like just being able to watch that from like a third party. I know that like RPGs aren't really esports or anything like that, but that's just like something that younger kids can play that's like non-toxic, single player and whatnot.
Yeah, and beyond esports itself, I mean, video games themselves teach you, again, all sorts of skills, including leadership and social skills. So those do come in handy. MMOs and colleges and career opportunities will look for things like leadership skills. So, for me, before I got this job, I had led like tons of World of Warcraft guilds, competitive ones, and I ran tournaments for them, and I ran a website for them, and that all went on my resume, including the guild leadership stuff, and so that went very well. It's important to be able to understand how to extrapolate your experience in esports as well as other careers and industries into the esports field, because it's very easy to do, and a lot of esports people recognize that, even the older ones.
Oh yeah, like what we're starting to see right now in education, like in the collegiate aspect more so than high school aspect, but like high schools are starting to pick up on it, I've noticed in like some of the more metropolitan areas like Chicago. They're starting to have like esport clubs and like specializations. Like Harrisburg University has like an esports degree right now, right?
Yeah,
like
they just announced their 4-year esports degree, and I believe Shenandoah University, who has some people here at the convention down in South Virginia, normally also offers a master's degree in esports. And Harrisburg is, I believe, management and production for esports. So
yeah. And it's really interesting that they're doing production, because normally like that falls under like the communications and broadcasting side of a college. So one thing that I get asked really frequently online or in my streams or whenever I do lectures like this, or like lecture at colleges, is how like people want to be shoutcasters, because like you'll see the people that do like shoutcasting or commentating on ESPN for like football, and people are like, well, we see people do that in the Overwatch League or in League or like Paladins or something. Like, how do we do that? Like, how do we get into that? And like they want to know like what specific degree they need to do, and there's a lot, like very large amount of correlation between doing it for like a sports broadcaster as well as like an esports broadcaster, because they're basically the same thing, just different terminology in esports versus like giant dudes hitting each other physically. You just have in-game giant dudes hitting each other physically. So, like, just seeing that, like, mainstream education is starting to recognize that, oh, hey, like, we could have a specialization in this and, like, focus on the different nuances and stuff. Like, I think it's really neat.
Yeah, I mean, high schools especially have been, actually, I believe high schools really got more involved in esports prior to colleges themselves. Colleges, you really couldn't do anything regarding esports in them until about a year or two ago. And so high schools, you've had the high school esports league for 3 or 4 years maybe, and I know in this area alone there's at least 12 high schools with high school esports leagues teams. So it's definitely picking up across the board. I haven't really seen anything in regards to middle school yet, but I think that's to be expected considering ages and whatnot.
Yeah, and plus, like, the stress from esports, I could see how middle school students wouldn't be able to handle it very well. Like, even high school age is still kind of young for being able to handle the stress of being in, like, for instance, open division.
Right, yeah, and that's sort of an inherent contradiction in the industry, and it's a one we're going to have to overcome because kids at a younger age, they have a higher level of plasticity in their brains, so they're actually better at video games than us as adults, and there's, no matter how good you do, eventually, the best player in the world in the Overwatch League is, when they're 25, their reactions aren't going to be as fast as the guy who's 16 and not allowed to compete. So that's going to sort of be eventually a reckoning that the industry will have to come with, and I think we'll start seeing an increase in attention on collegiate esports, in part because of that, and also the stability. I think it was 2 days ago, Monte Cristo of the Overwatch League decided he was no longer going to be working with the Overwatch League as a shoutcaster, and MLG Puckett is no longer going to be as well. So I think it's likely, as we see pros and possibly even those guys, as we see pros retiring from more mainstream esports, we'll see them going into colleges. And even Harrisburg University just signed Elk, formerly of the Philadelphia Fusion Overwatch League team. And they have also got a pro coach. So I think you're going to see something of a small exodus to college esports during the next few years because of mostly the stability.
Oh, yeah. And plus, like, because a lot of the players are at their peak when they're younger. Like, I know some people that went into professional gaming when they were literally like 15 or 16 years old and stuff like that. And so when you're going to Evo at like 16 years old or something like that, like, you don't need to go to college. Or like, a lot of gamers think that, like, they don't need to go to college and stuff like that.
You should, if you have the option.
You should if you have the ability to.
It's a lot easier.
But they'll just like play through their college years and stuff like that, and then when they get to like our age, they'll like start slowing down, start looking at other avenues, and then like I could see colleges like picking them up and everything. Like, I know St. Francis was looking at doing that when I was there. They're like, hey, do you know any contenders players that want to play on our team? We'll give them a scholarship.
Yeah, and actually the local former support player for the Washington Justice, Fozix, his name's Riley, he retired from the Overwatch League as well and is looking to get into college esports now, and he's going to go get his degree there, and he's getting a full scholarship because of his performance and playing in contenders in the Overwatch League for NRG as well as DC.
And that's actually something interesting because when I was in college, I was a traditional athlete. I did figure skating at Liberty University, and so when you do like collegiate sports, generally speaking, like if you are professional or like have done professional stuff like at a sport, you can't really compete like collegiately. So like, for instance, you'll never see a figure skater that's competed in Worlds or the Olympics like figure skate for a university. Like, that's just not gonna happen. People don't do that. But there's no like rule against that in esports. So you like we were talking about, you have all these younger people, they go pro and then they retire and they go to college and everything with the money that they earned from esports. And so
yeah, as players, that's a great angle to go to get scholarships. There's more and more of those scholarships becoming available. As a non-player, I think you're better off going the more traditional route of going straight to college, unless you are able to support yourself in other ways and work on sort of like your own projects, much like I did.
But it really
It can be
helps to have
difficult.
that degree, because otherwise you're just doing a bunch of unpaid work in the beginning, because esports is the wild, wild west, and there's not that much regulation right now.
Yeah, I think anyone getting into esports who doesn't go to college and get a degree will be looking at doing volunteer work. I actually, I know a guy who's a consultant at Deloitte, and Deloitte, for those of you who don't know, is a Fortune 500 company who employs about 240,000 people. This gentleman is also a volunteer League of Legends coach at North Virginia Community College, and this guy is a serious gentleman. So even if you do go to college and you don't have experience, it's important to leverage as much as you can, but you should also try to get experience aside from just a degree. That's very, very pivotal, I'd say. A lot of the times, experience in general trumps a degree.
I can vouch for that. I didn't graduate college, and I'm a director now, so experience really works well. The degree would have made things a lot nicer. I would have had more options if I had a degree versus like my tournament win rate and everything. But I was gonna say something and I just completely lost my train of thought. Yeah?
Quick question. So you guys are talking about folks playing these games. I used to play when I was younger as well. I'm looking at the viability of esports related degrees and people going to college, that sort of thing. What's the viability? So a lot of people do play video games. What's your percentage? Because like obviously professional sports, we're talking about a significantly less percentage of people who play in like high school end up in like a professional league. What sort of percentages do you look at?
Very, very small.
It's harder to be a professional gamer than it is to be a professional athlete.
Yeah, absolutely. If your goal is to become a professional gamer and you want to go to school for that, you need to have a plan B, and you need to realize that...
And a plan C.
And a plan C.
And a plan C.
And you need to realize that an incredibly small, insignificant fraction of people actually get to that level. So you should definitely have other things you want to do in the industry. It's okay to pursue if you're being a pro player if you want to, but it is by far the hardest, and the majority of collegiate esports doesn't really regard playing on or getting to a professional level.
Yeah, because like I just got back from coaching a collegiate team, and I have played in professional tournaments before, like a lot of them, and there is a distinct difference between the level of gamer that most collegiate gamers are versus people who are going to go play in like a major or a minor tournament. Like, I'm kind of washed up because I haven't put forth the effort to play on my main since like 2018. So like I've been smurfing for the past year if I do decide to play the game, right? Because I'm retired. I don't need that stress in my life anymore. Like, I thought I would be washed up and I would be like the worst person going into this like collegiate experience, because like for traditional sports, there's not like that much of a difference between like the top crop of like your collegiate athlete versus like your professional and everything. Like there's really not that much difference, but with esports, like there really is.
Yeah, I mean, to get into...
Like I 1v6'd the whole team, and I'm a support main.
She's better than I am at Overwatch.
And like it just like kind of clicked to me. Like most of the collegiate players, because like esports is so new, a lot of colleges are just honestly taking who they can get. A lot of the colleges don't have like qualified coaches yet, or people who understand the nuances in the games and stuff like that. So a lot of the times these colleges are not getting like the top 1% of gamers, like what you would pull from if you were in an org and you were trying to fill a team roster. They're pulling from like average level gamers. And I know that sounds condescending, but there's a big difference between the top 1% of the top 1% versus like somebody in like platinum or like gold in League of Legends or something. Like there's a big difference. And so most of the time the players that do play collegiately, like they're not good enough to play professionally. And so they're just doing that for like a partial scholarship or for like something fun to do while they're in college, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, and you have to keep in mind if you're trying to be a professional player, like tier 1 professional player, you're going to be practicing 8 to 10, possibly even more hours a day. So that doesn't leave much time for classes.
And that is not just playing, that is other things too. Everybody thinks that like, oh, I'm just going to play this game for 8 to 10 hours a day. And that's not what you do. You have like a structured schedule and
VOD reviews.
Yeah.
You have coaches
Analytics.
behind you telling you when you messed up every time and how not to do it again and all
Yeah.
that. So that doesn't leave time for taking your courses and succeeding.
yeah.
Do we want
So
to take questions?
when do you make that decision to kind of go that route? Because you said there's a key set of things this individual should be doing, but if they're intent on trying to have a plan B, they can't go to college, like, where's your cutoff? When do you say to somebody, like, you should put in those hours and make that time because you look like you're going to be good? Where do you make that call?
I've actually had to make that call for people before, and it's been difficult. That was the hardest part of being a pro gamer. I had to do that for some of my teammates because my org, they gave me complete free reign over my team. Like, I didn't need to have a manager if I didn't want one, so like I handled everything because some people are irresponsible. And we like handled picking, like we chose our own teammates, like we held our own tryouts, we handled all of that, like interviews and stuff. And like like when people don't continue improving, like you need to cut them loose because at the end of the day you need to make your org money and you need to win. And just normally when it comes to making the call for if you're going to be a pro gamer or if you're going to continue pouring your effort into something like that, because it is a very high stress job and whatnot, like normally consult with like trusted peers. Like if you have a practice buddy, if you're doing like a FGC game versus like a team-based game, where like consult with your teammates. And if they're like, hey, you know, you're acting kind of body, maybe you should like take a step back, like take a break or something. Like that always helps. Because
Yeah.
a lot of the times you don't see it personally. So you have to see it from like other people, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and you know, competing on like a ladder or something as opposed to scrimmages against another team,
It's totally different.
It's totally different. But if you're playing Overwatch for 2 years and you haven't peaked at top 500 or 4,000 plus, you know, you're not going to be able to go pro. Some people practice gets them better, but at the end of the day, it requires like something on a cognitive level that's innate to play as if you're a prodigy, which is essentially what these top players in the world are.
Yeah, like going on that, like an analogy I say all the time, and I do mean it condescending when I say it because I get I say it whenever I'm tilted, whenever I'm smurfing, but like imagine having your border match your SR. And like, it's toxic saying it like that, but then if you really think about it, like if you're a silver border, but like you're still in a silver ranking, that means you've put over 500 hours into this game in order to be that ranking. If you've put like 500 hours into this game and you still have below average understanding of like the mechanics, like the game sense, positioning, game strategy, all this other stuff, like realistically, you're not going to be able to go pro. Like, it's, in a lot of these games, like, yeah, there is kind of an elo hell, as people put it, but like, you can climb out of it. Like, if you are as good as you think you are, you will climb out of it. And so, like, if you have a situation like that, and like, if you're stuck at a lower ranking, like, maybe that's where you're supposed to be. Like, maybe you're not going to be the next, like, pro CSGO player, you know, or the next like Nairo. Like maybe that's just not you, and that's not most people.
Yeah, I mean, that's okay. There's so many jobs in this industry. And one thing I like to tell colleges and people I'm just trying to inform about the industry in general is that for every job that there is in traditional sports, there's a mirror job for it in esports. And I'd say that there's even more potential jobs in esports because it's a technologically inclined industry as opposed to football, which is just the only technical aspect to that is the broadcasting, really.
Yeah, like for esports, you have like your whole tech crew that'll set up for tournaments. Then you have like your sound crew and your lighting crew, and then you have your streaming crew, and then like the broadcasters and stuff like that. And then you have like the graphic artists and the moderators for the streams.
I mean, the list just goes on and on.
Like,
and it's not just for events, right? There's stuff like what
Yeah.
myself and Makomi do. Makomi does marketing, I do consulting and sales, and so there's always going to be
Sponsorship
something in the
acquisition.
industry. And sponsorship acquisitions.
business stuff, like even the people who run orgs. Like I was scrolling through Tempo Storm's page the other day because they'll have like listings available, you know, and I have friends that I like to refer jobs for and stuff. And they had an executive assistant position listed, and like I don't know if you guys know what that is. That's essentially a secretary or a personal assistant for like a CEO of a company. Like they have something like that for esports. Like that's a normal job in esports, and like you had to have like a degree, you had to have like minimum years of experience in this and everything. Like it was very professional and whatnot, and like that's how your esports is going right now. Like you can still get your foot in the door at being like a bottom tier like content creator for an org, and then eventually work your way up, like build your resume experience. But like a lot of orgs are starting to require college degrees in specific fields nowadays.
Yeah, absolutely. But you know, that reminds me, even like low-level content creators can find stuff in this industry. If you don't know the website called hitmarker.com, I don't work for them or anything. They're not paying me to say this, but every esports company lists their jobs there, so I'd suggest checking that regularly if you're in the market. So yeah, do we want to take questions or?
Yeah, we can take questions. What time is it? Yeah,
Got
we can
about
take
half hour.
questions.
Yeah, we're
we
about
have like a
halfway
half
through.
hour.
So questions? Anyone?
Behind.
Okay, I have a very basic one. Can you just describe the basic concept of esports to me?
People click on heads very well.
So.
Video game with sports, like.
So think of the way I like to talk about esports is that it's like watching the NFL for your video game. So you're on a closed map. People either have guns or they have special abilities. You're on teams and you play against each other.
Yeah, and then so like
Competitively.
for traditional sports, you know how you have like football, baseball, basketball, soccer, things like that. So esports has things like that with like the different games and the different genres of games. So you have like first-person shooter games, FPS, that would like be COD, Halo, Overwatch, things like that. And then you would have like MOBAs, that would be like League of Legends and Dota, I think.
Yeah, League of Legends and Dota. And MOBA stands for Multiplayer Online Battle Arena. No.
No.
No, in esport, okay, so also think of basketball, right? So basketball is only a game. It took the NBA putting a wrapper around it to call it a sport. So it's a lot like with esports. Unless the publisher or a third party is putting a wrapper around this game in a competitive context, then it's not an esport.
So it's like playing against other people?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So that'd be like if we had two PCs up here, I would 1v1 him.
Yeah, and she'd win,
Most likely.
probably.
Yeah. Yes.
Let's do you and then.
Wait, yeah, you. I'm so sorry. I'm blonde. Goldfish memory.
What do you think is the best way to get involved in more of the sales, consulting, like advertising sales, that side of these businesses?
With or without experience?
With experience, but in other industries other than video games.
Okay, yeah, so that's super easy, honestly. As long as you have an interest in knowledge in video games and esports, honestly, just like take your resume and add a few things about your passion for video games and start sending it around. I don't know any company who, like, as I mentioned, this guy I know at Deloitte, who's a consultant. I mean, he just started this degree, this coaching thing, volunteer, but the fact that he doesn't have a job yet kind of tells me that he hasn't been applying, because if you have that experience already and you already have that passion and knowledge, it's much easier than anything else. So.
Oh yeah, like in esports, if you have, like, LinkedIn is another good resource actually. I actually got my job with American Esports through LinkedIn. But like if you have, like if you're competent and you have a proven track record of being competent, people will eat you up.
Yeah, our CEO used to sell knives.
Yeah.
He did a great job selling knives, but.
Yeah, and like I'm like a self-made content creator. Well, everybody's a self-made content creator. That's weird, but like I learned how to do everything myself for the most part. Like I was one of the first cosplayers to even do like get sponsored and stuff like that back in the day and whatnot. And so I had to learn how to do all of it myself. And through doing it on an individual level, like I got paid to like consult for other companies and stuff like that to help build their sponsorship programs and like do networking and stuff like that. And then like I just built it until I got to the director level for a company, whatnot, like over the years and stuff. And it just happens sometimes.
I think we missed your question.
Yeah, we did.
Right there.
So I'm kind of in the same situation as your friends. Out of college, I have a non-gaming, or esports, I should say, related degree.
Okay.
But went to hitmaker.com.
Yeah.
Got a volunteer position. And so now I'm kind of the NAGM of a small org. How do you...
Which one?
Imperium.
Okay.
How a lot of the way we get players for our different teams is people coming out of college teams. How would you recommend we kind of weed out the people who really shouldn't be on a professional team? And once we get those higher level players, how would you recommend we focus on retaining the players?
So are you looking to recruit like the top of the top in terms of players, or?
We're a growing org, and a lot of the people working for Imperium are volunteers, so
Okay,
I'd say we'd
yeah.
be looking for an Nairo or any of like the top players, but we want to improve as an org, we want to grow, and we want to get our name out there.
Okay. Do you want to answer first and then I follow up?
Well, you've
or-
run teams more than I have, right?
Yeah, a little
run-
bit. This is my day job for a couple years. So at the end of the day, being able to weed out people, you need to know enough about the game in order to know if a person sucks or not. Like that's putting it very bluntly.
I mean, it should be up to your coach, right?
If you have a coach, a lot of the smaller orgs actually don't have coaches.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming, do you guys have coaches? No?
It's managers. My job specifically is to manage the managers. And then,
Okay, so you're a general manager then?
yes.
Okay. All right. So managers aren't normally the people that have the game sense to, unless they're like former pros in the game. But normally if you're a former pro in a game, you become a coach or like an analyst or something like that, or a shoutcaster. I became a manager though because I like details. But like normally the coach has like the game sense to weed people out. Also having the people on the team, like if you do have competent people on your team already, it doesn't sound like you do, but like if you do get competent people, maybe having the players on the team be involved in the tryout process and everything, because like you should never accept a player just based on a resume. Like
Yeah.
I don't care who the player is, especially for a team-based game. Like if you have a pre-existing team and they're doing okay, like you need to make sure that the new person you bring in will work with that team. Like I've had very, very talented people send in an application and do an interview to be a part of like one of my teams before, and they're great, like very amazing, but you know, they don't get along with the people on my team, and you can tell in game that there's just not that synergy, and so like we don't accept them.
Yeah, and it's very difficult because if a player doesn't trust their coach, they're not going to listen to what they say. The other point I want to make about that is that if you're looking to bring on players, there's two things you should keep in mind, and two things that most esports orgs keep in mind, is that it's 50% skill and 50% marketability. So if you've got no social skills, if you don't talk, if you don't look at your eyes in the camera when it's on you, they're less likely to take you over somebody equally as skilled who does do that stuff. So
Especially because a lot of the orgs make their money through like 2 or 3 different ways. You have your tournament earnings, you have your like sponsorship and partnership deals with like other companies and stuff like that, and then you have your content creation. So the org I came from made the majority of its money off of our content creation. Actually, we're a very content heavy org. And like we did win a lot of tournaments. We actually had the top ranked team for Arena of Valor like in the world in our org. And then like we had my Overwatch team, and we had people who placed like top 8 at Evo in our org as well. So we were a pretty good org.
yeah,
And
sorry.
so like you need to evaluate where you're able to bring in the majority of your money, because at the end of the day, if you're trying to get higher level talent, like you're gonna have to pay for higher level talent. Like honestly, the only reason I even signed with an org was because they gave me a stipend. I'm gonna be very upfront about that. Like I made money just like every month by existing in that org and entering tournaments. Like that was outside of tournament earnings and stuff like that, because I'm an adult, I have bills, I have a kid, I have student loans. Gotta be an adult. And a lot of the better players, like they do have monthly stipends that you have to pay. Like some of them are thousands of dollars, some of them are like hundreds of dollars. It just depends on the player and everything. And if your org doesn't have the budget for that, maybe finding other ways that you could sweeten deals with players. Like bare minimum, if you're gonna have a player in your org, if you're sending them to a major or a minor tournament, you need to pay for their food, their entry fee, and like their hotel and their travel, like bare minimum. And I've seen some orgs that don't even pay that, but they expect these players to wear their jersey on main stage and play in the finals. And that's just not okay.
Yeah. Now I know you're not looking at like the top level of player, right? So you're dealing on a volunteer basis. In terms of incentivizing that, what I ran that eSports league years and years ago, and we would run events with like 25 to 30 volunteers in different time zones and all that. So I think you have to be really nice to the people you work with.
Take care of them.
Take care of them. Care
It's a
about
family.
them. Like ask them how they're doing. And also those people have to be passionate, or they're not gonna do it eventually, or they're gonna not be reliable when they need to be reliable. So it's a lot of it's people skills and just constant engagement and trying to find other ways to make it worth their while. Like if they're having a bad day, talk to them, get in a Discord call with them for a while and have a chat. So it's when you can't offer money, it really a lot of the times is the little things that counts, because that's all you really can give. So
Yeah, because it's really stressful.
yeah,
Like-
it's like working a full-time job, honestly.
Yeah, like full disclosure, I had to go back on like antidepressants when I was a pro gamer and everything. Like full disclosure, like it is so stressful and everything. And I wasn't even competing in like tier 1. I was competing in like tier 3 level stuff, and it was still like really stressful. So like just having like that support system really helps a lot of people.
Yeah, I think that's actually a point worth emphasizing, the mental health aspect of working in this industry and education. Because obviously, like, you're just going into college for the first time, right? You're out on your own. It's a new environment. There's a lot of influences that you're not used to, and it can not be great. And the burnout of esports, 8 to 13 hours a day, cannot be great. And trying to find a job and not having college experience cannot be great. So, I mean, mean, at the end of the day, like self-care is really pivotal, and we're seeing an increase in health and wellness efforts in the industry. I think it's very much needed. I remember, myself, I was building my career in this in DC, and took me about 2 years to land something really solid after I moved here. But during a portion of that time, I was nearly homeless, and it was incredibly stressful. I didn't give up, but and that's why I'm here today. But you need to, if you don't go to college and you're trying to get a job in esports, at least not as a player, you need to be prepared to risk everything. And most people just can't. They don't have the money. And they have kids or other responsibilities, and they have a social life, and they want to be near family and all that. So I think you really have to take care of yourself in this career, in this industry, no matter where you work in it.
Mm-hmm. Have any more questions? Yeah.
So I'm trying to figure out when this started. We're seeing in 2010 is a key year, but like when did this, or 2002? Like when did this really start, and how big is this industry?
It's been around since the 90s.
So esports, as it is known today, didn't originate really as esports. It originated as a bunch of kids taking computers to some parents' basement and hooking it up to their dorm room and hooking it up to a network. So I'd say that if you won't find anybody who has more than like 20 years of experience in esports, right?
Yeah,
as it is known today.
I've seen some older people on in LinkedIn and stuff that are like our parents' age. They're like, I have 30 years of experience in esports. I'm like, oh, tell me more, because video games didn't even come out until the 80s.
Right. So like for me, most of the time when I talk to somebody about my experience, I'll say I have 13 years of experience in competitive video games, and 5 that's really esports focused, because esports wasn't really a thing when I got the majority of my experience. And so, it started pretty much towards the turn of the century is when the industry started. And it is the fastest growing tech industry in the world. I believe it's now $1 billion industry, and it's projected to be, I think, at least a $1.7 billion industry by the end of 2020. So it's growing very quickly. It's growing faster than traditional sports even. Yep.
You had a question?
You basically were mentioning the mental health aspects. Do you find that the colleges are setting up that support system?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm very surprised about it, honestly, because when I was a college athlete, I didn't have a team psychiatrist or anything like that, but the college I just got back from, St. Francis University, they're like very much caring about the mental health. They also have like a nutritionist on staff and a physical therapist type person, so like a kinesiology person to like help maintain injuries and stuff like that, and they're doing a lot. And also some orgs also are starting to have esports therapists as well.
Some of them even have their own cooks who live in-house and cook healthy meals for their players.
What a day to be alive, right? But yeah,
Wouldn't
people
that
are
be
starting
nice?
to care about it a lot more.
Yeah.
But,
And it's oh, sorry.
Well, I mean, you can finish this.
Oh yeah, I just wanted to say it's worth noting that the growth in esports is in part exponential because of the health-related issues or lack thereof. When you look at football, right? I know when I played a little football when I was a kid. My mother was extremely hesitant. She didn't want me getting a concussion. I did get a concussion at a very young age. It wasn't a bad one, but and eventually I stopped playing. But you can't get concussions in esports. You can get cognitive, mental health, anxiety, depression. That can all be remedied. But aside from that, it's really your wrist, arms,
your elbow, shoulder, and
right.
sometimes your lower back or neck.
And
all
sometimes you
stuff
can
that
get
be
eye
treated.
stress, headaches, but it's very minimal compared to traditional sports. And the reason that makes esports exponential is because as the generations grow, parents and kids are playing more and more video games. So Makomi, her kids are not going to play football more than likely. They're more likely to play Overwatch. And so as the generations go
He
on...
wants to be a sniper like mommy. I cried when he said that the first time.
Right. So as generations go on, esports gets exponentially more popular as the parents teach their kids to play that instead of football, and those kids teach their kids, and so on. So.
Yes.
Yeah, so nowadays we're getting new leagues basically every year or so. Now we have Call of Duty League out, obviously Overwatch League is now in its third year, League of Legends, Dota, then now we have for fighting games we got
Street Fighter, Capcom Cup, we have Tekken's tournament, and you've got, Mortal Kombat as well has their stuff as well. Right? So what's the incentive to even just go to college before, like if I turn 18, if I go back 10 years and I'm, top 500, which I wasn't. But if I was that good, and I was, almost 10 years ago, and I get an offer, at the time for, a professional career, why shouldn't I take that money then instead of just go to college immediately?
Oh, you should.
Yeah.
Let's look at traditional sports, right? Like football,
Right.
You have to go to college before you can be a pro.
Yeah, no.
You can't skip that.
Yeah.
But with this, you'd be like,
Yeah, that's absolutely
Yeah, that's
what you should
exactly.
do.
you're giving me a minimum 50 grand
Right.
for joining your team,
Yeah.
or I could spend 50 grand a year going to college.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
See, at the time, we're going back in time before there was an eSports team on your college, but if we're taking this as today,
Yeah. So no,
why should I take college before I go?
you shouldn't. You shouldn't. You should
Yeah.
always start playing first, because for a couple of reasons. One, you're not going to be as good when you get out of college. You just won't be. No matter how much you practice and how much improvement you see during that time that you are playing, at the end of it, you won't be as good. And you're more likely to get a sponsorship at the end of your career. If you are that good and you do want to go to college after, which you should be doing,
Yeah.
you should have it written into your contract and have it negotiated by a lawyer or an agent. I'd recommend a lawyer over an agent every time, personally.
Yeah. That's a whole other panel. That's a whole other panel.
Yikes.
But also, some tournaments actually give college scholarships away as prizes.
Yeah.
There was
So.
Here's the dorm and stuff.
Here's of the Storm.
In the high
that,
school esports league, yeah.
Rest in peace, Here's the Storm.
Yeah. That's another thing that I can't speak about publicly. I have thoughts. I have thoughts.
Great here, but NDA says otherwise.
Like, if this was tea,
Did that answer your question?
Yeah, for the most. It's actually another question on top of that is your opinions based on fighting game trajectory and FPS trajectory and MOBAs, I guess, because they both involve high, APM, right? But with fighting games, you still have people like Daigo, Justin Wong, who have been playing for decades now.
yeah.
They're still top. They're getting to middle age, but you still have young blood of like 18-year-olds coming in.
Yeah. So,
Like,
technically,
there's more lifespan as a player in fighting games than FPS. Because FPS, if you're 30,
well, that's mainly because FPS games are more stressful, I think, than fighting games. Also, fighting game engines, they don't exactly change that often. I think Street Fighter 4 was the first Street Fighter to actually change their engine.
all the commandments are pretty much the same.
Yeah.
Just add different stuff each iteration.
Yeah, but a lot of the stuff doesn't really change as much. Ultimate changed a lot in Smash, in comparison to the other games and stuff like that. But there's not as much change in everything. For first-person shooter games, it's a new game. Overwatch is a new game. It's a better version of Team Fortress 2, but it's a new game.
And the meta changes are
Yeah.
far more significant. And I would differentiate Overwatch as more of a FPS MOBA hybrid, but
Yeah.
the meta changes are important. For FGC, I would say that it's interesting that you point out some of the players have been doing it for decades, right? And
Yeah.
but FGC hates esports. And most of them, not most, a lot of the top players are not marketable. So
Yeah.
you won't have the investment money coming in. So in
That's
terms
why
of
a lot of orgs only have maybe one or two Smash Bros players, for instance, but then they'll have a full roster in the Overwatch League of 9-10 players.
Yeah, and I'm not FGC, so I'm speaking as someone from the outside, but if they don't want esports and they're not marketable, then they aren't going to get esports, even if they are, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's okay to have things grassroots, but career-wise, it's never going to be what a MOBA or an FPS Tier 1 esport will be.
And as far as the age coming into factor, like I said, it's like just like different like game styles and like changes and stuff like that. Also, I mean, you do have older people who play first-person shooters. Like, I didn't get signed to an org to play Overwatch until I was... See, I'm so old, I have to think how old I was when it happened. Like 26.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, I'm older than you.
No wonder you. No, you're not. How old are you?
I'm 28.
Oh, she's older than me. Yeah, she's a year older.
Yeah, I'm a
than
year
me.
older than you, you baby. Go eat your carrots or something.
Toxic. Toxic.
But yeah, like I got signed to my first org at 26 years old for a first-person shooter after being married
Which
and
is
having a kid.
abnormal. Yeah.
Like, it's kind of weird if you think about it.
Also, looping back to your point real quick, fighting games are tactic-based and slow-paced compared to something like Overwatch. So your reactions, the diminishing of your reactions as you age is not as palpable in FGC.
And also, like, your reactions, like, they slow down from, I think it's like 18 or 20 until 25. But then you're at, like, a plateau for a while, like a really long time you're at a plateau. Like, you don't get into the whole, like, middle-aged crisis thing until, like, you're literally midlife crisis thing. So
25.
Well,
Yeah.
actually, that's when the male brain stops physically developing,
yeah.
technically.
So...
We are running out of time, so
Oh,
I don't
we
know
are?
if we want to do just a few more questions.
Oh, yeah.
or-
Oh, I could talk, like, that's a whole other panel.
We could both go on
Whole
forever.
other panel. Do we
Yeah.
have more questions? You had one?
Yeah.
I know, yeah.
So you mentioned some orgs that sort of, they don't do the bare minimum for their players.
Can you talk up? I'm deaf. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you mentioned orgs that don't do the bare minimum for their players. What are some things that young players need to be cognizant of when they're signing contracts? What are some things about exploitable contracts and how do players sort of navigate that?
I can roll through that super quick because I did a panel on this last year. Word. Okay. So as a player, you need to make sure, like when you read through your contract, one, if you're like a really big up and coming, like do you FGC at all?
No. I'm not even related
Oof.
to this thing. A question I had.
Oh, okay. So when you're like, say you go to, there was this guy, he went to Super Smash Con this August, and it's the second largest Super Smash Bros. Esport event in the world. I was a guest, by the way.
It's actually right down the street.
Plugging myself for a minute. I was proud of it. But he was a complete unknown from North California, Louis Money. He's actually a really sweet kid. I talked to him for a bit. But he's never been to a major, never even been to a minor, literally only played in like locals, basically. He flew out here and he placed top 8 in the second largest event in the world. And he had offers from all over, like tier 1 orgs, like all over, like, and one of the things I told him, like, make sure that you're getting paid and make sure that you have things in there where they cover everything for you. So like bare minimum, like very few people are gonna have a like debut like that. Like I did not have a debut like that. Make sure that at the bare minimum you get all of your tournament expenses covered. There are a lot of tournaments where you don't actually need to travel to them. A lot of tournaments you can do like online, and those tournaments like maybe there's an entry fee or something like that, but you don't have to have like room, lodging, travel, things like that. If your org wants you to travel, they pay for you to travel. You don't travel on your own dime. I never traveled on my own dime when I was a part of an org or did anything related to sponsors, because sometimes I would go out and do things for sponsors as well, because like I'm personable, I can talk to people, and so they'd have me be at their booth talking to people.
3 more questions.
Okay, but yeah, make sure that that's covered, and then make sure that you don't give away all of your tournament earnings, all of your Twitch revenue, things like that, because some orgs try to take everything from you.
Yeah. Also, if you're at the point where you have a contract in front of you, you should never sign anything unless you have a lawyer looking at it at all. No matter how simple the contract is, even having a lawyer there will tell that team that they can't screw you over or they're going to have a problem on their hands. So, I mean, it could be like a paragraph of a contract. You should have a lawyer. It doesn't matter. At the very least, an agent. I think lawyers are always better, though. So I think we're going to do a few more questions, probably really quick. I know you've had one for a while, and then raise your hand if you have a question. Okay. Go for it.
Oh, so just a quick question. So all of this encompassed with eSports. So would you, as of right now, consider this a niche product? As far as, in other words, how do you see, in a certain amount of years, do you see this catching on to the mainstream?
I think it already is.
Has.
Yeah, absolutely. It already is catching on. I think in about 15 years, it'll be far more popular than traditional sports.
Like you can buy a Fortnite T-shirt in Target.
It's actually funny. They're saying that the new golf of Silicon Valley is Fortnite.
Yeah.
So it's already mainstream. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's going to just be more so the case, I think. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, we have 5 more minutes.
Any other questions? Okay. Well.
Yeah.
I think that's
We're early. Yay.
Yes. Thank you.